Hi there, how are you? I am hoping that by making this video, I'm able to answer a whole lot of email all at the same time. But before I do you like my new bracelet? Shout out to John Brady for that. You know, in this brave new digital world in which we live, a lot of people come to the internet in order to get their theology straight. And I think that's fair game. It's sort of the modern equivalent of going to books to find out what theologians have said. And there is a lot of good, sound doctrine that you can hear on the internet or that you can read. We actually have access to more good theology online than previous generations have had. There's a lot of stuff out there. Now, granted, there's a lot of bad stuff out there too. You do have to be careful and hold everybody to the Word of God, because there are plenty of folks with no church affiliation that have a webcam and are saying all kinds of crazy things about God and about the Bible. But if you can cull through all that and get to the good stuff, there is a lot of sound theology online. And as a result, people write to me and they say, well then, what about church? Is church still necessary? Can I just stay home and can I listen to internet preachers and can I get my doctrine right? And is that sufficient for the Christian life? And the answer is, church is important. I really do think that. But when I say the word church, what I mean is a gathering together of a community of like-minded saints. And that's sometimes difficult to find. GCA began because I myself had left a couple of churches. And I'm the kind of guy who says, if you're going to complain, then do it better yourself. When someone comes to me and complains about anything, I say, fine, you do it. And so that's my attitude. And once I left a series of churches because I just couldn't find any place that had good, sound, consistent doctrine, I decided to start a Bible study in my house. And that's the way GCA started. And then we eventually bought a public building. And at the beginning of June this year, 2016, will be our 15th anniversary. 15 years as a public church. That's really quite remarkable. But here's the important part. When we gather together, we're able to, number one, look each other in the eye. We're able to lift one another's burdens. We're able to share each other's joys. We're able to pray for one another and study the Word as a community, as a group. And I think that's very important. It's part of the Christian life. The Christian life cannot be a one-way street. And I think people who just absorb theology but don't ever share that theology are kind of acting as a one-way street. They're takers, but not necessarily givers. And it's a two-way street. I learned sound theology, but I also teach sound theology. I learned about the Bible from various different churches and various different men and various different writers, but I also work real hard to share that with as many people as I can. And I think church affords you that opportunity. Gathering together with a body of believers, number one, makes you feel less alone in the world. And number two, gives you an opportunity to share what you think and what you've learned. And so I think that church is really important. However, having said that, I'm sympathetic. I understand. Like I said, I've left a couple of churches. I know it's hard to find a good church. I know it's difficult to find sound doctrine in a church. It's difficult to find a church that is consistent with its theology and its body life. Sometimes there's so much emphasis on body life that the idea of theology flies right out the window. Or sometimes it's just all the frozen chosen. It's just theology, but there's no real interaction, no body life. And so that was my goal, to give people a place that they could go where they could get sound theology, biblical teaching, where they could interact both with each other and interact with me and that we could, as a community, kind of grow and increase through this Christian life together, so that there is sound body life and sound theology. But that's hard to find. I know it's tough to find. And so my recommendation is this. My recommendation is to keep looking, keep going around, looking at churches, even small groups, and then trust through prayer that God is going to lead you to an appropriate place where you can be part of a community of believers. And it may take some time. It may take a long time to find the right group. I have people ask me all the time, can you move GCA to Montana or Florida or Michigan? Or can you move a church like GCA? Can you bring it to Texas? Can you bring it? I'm asked that all the time because people, they hear us and they understand what we're doing and they think, well, I want something like that. And it's rare. It's hard to find. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And the only way that you're going to find out if it exists is to beat the pavement. Get out there on the streets and poke your head into every church that you can find. And hopefully you'll find a community of people where you can share what you're learning. Hopefully you'll find a pastor who's open enough to theology that you can have good, solid conversations with him. And then between the two of you, you can work out these theological differences or challenges. So, yes, church is important. Yes, theology is important. Ideal churches, really hard to find. Every church, including GCA, has its problems. But that doesn't mean it's not worth it. It's still worth it to get together with other saints of the Lord and talk about the things of God. So be a two-way street. Don't just absorb the theology. Share the theology, even with a neighbor or with a loved one or with a family member or with a community, a small Bible study. And I think I'm living evidence that if you can't find that, well, you do it. I think it's important that the word goes out, that the word is preached, that the word is taught, and that's a good enough reason to get together. One last thing. I do know of a couple of groups who have gotten together as a church community, but they listen to a sermon online, one of ours or one of somebody else's. So they listen to the sermon and then they discuss it. They pray and they sing together and they share each other's burdens together, and they're operating essentially as a church. And I even know one that started out that way and then called a pastor. So it can be done. I just don't think you should ever give up on the idea. It's kind of like Hebrews 10:25. The forsake not the assembling of yourselves together. I think the assembling of yourselves together is important. Now, granted, in context, I think that verse is talking generally about the church continuing to get together and not letting persecution drive them underground or make them stop meeting for fear. I think it's important that the church meets, but I also think it's important that individual Christians, kind of the indicative imperative that you've heard me talk about so often, genuine Christians who know that they're saved, who know that they're blood-bought, who know that they're redeemed, who know that they're saved since before the foundation of the world, those same Christians then need to gather with each other, share with each other, encourage one another, and get through this very tough sometimes Christian life together. I'll give you another quick example. You know that recently I had the event, and I will stop talking about it at some point. If I were a person who stayed to myself, if I just got my theology straight online, but I didn't interact with other Christians, then when I went to the hospital, there'd be nobody to come care about me. Sure, my daughter, but small group of people. But the church came, the saints came, people that I love and that love me came to make sure that I was okay, and they helped me through the process of recovering from the event. And that's what you get out of a community that is the church. You get sound doctrine, you get good teaching, you get Bible knowledge, but you also get a wider family. You also get a community. You also get to love one another. And I think that's important. So that's the answer to my very frequently asked question. I hope that that will save me from having to type it out over and over again. The short answer, had this been a really short video, the short answer is don't give up. Keep looking. There are saints out there. The elect exist. Now it's up to you to find them.